His own pet left-wing media went nuts. Why are we being denied our pictures so we can trash Bush and Cheney? Why? We want our pictures.
Last month, the Pentagon announced that it would release dozens of never-before-seen prisoner abuse photos from Iraq and Afghanistan, photos that had been the subject of a lawsuit by the ACLU. The president signed off on that decision to release the photos. The release date was set for May 28th. And then today, boomerang.
The most direct consequence of releasing them, I believe, would be to further inflame anti-American opinion and to put our troops in greater danger.
That sounds familiar, doesn't it? If you squint and don't really look at the screen very carefully, it sort of sounds like, yeah.
Yeah. You see what she's starting to say? We're starting to question the one, the only, his sublime wonderfulness. He's all of a sudden under suspicion for something that's really, really bad.
Is it the fact that the abuse happened that's really the problem in terms of any potential problems for our troops overseas? Or is it the fact that the abuse was photographed that is the problem? An unnamed Pentagon source tells the New York Times today that the photos being held back now are not as, quote, provocative as the pictures of prisoner abuse that we've already seen from Abu Ghraib. Apparently, according to this source, they just document additional cases of the sort of abuse of prisoners we have already seen. That has led to speculation today about what new additional controversy or uproar these images could cause that hasn't already been caused by the release of the Abu Ghraib photos. Unless, of course, the new controversy or uproar would be not about the specific things done to specific prisoners in these images, but rather about the fact that there are hundreds of more images of the same kind of abuse, which would lend credence to the idea that this wasn't just a small number of individuals carrying out freelance rogue abuse.
Oh, it's terrible that we're not going to be able to prove that it was one big plot, that Abu Ghraib wasn't part of the old thing, that there was something different. There was only 3 people waterboarded and only 25 people hung on chains so they would be sleep-deprived. Just so ticked off. That's Dr. Maddow, of course. To the left, and she is the left. To the far left, and she is the far left. Ms. Rhodes Scholars herself, far left. The greatest of them all is turning into gasp George W. Bush. Dr. Maddow brought on her own Supreme Court Justice, Jonathan Turley, law professor, to say, ugh, this is starting to seem just like the last guy. Oh, horrors.
Well, it's perfectly Orwellian, because we have, once again, the Obama administration, Obama himself, making statements and then doing the diametrically opposite thing in policy. It's like saying no one's above the law, but blocking any special prosecutor or investigation of torture. On the Freedom of Information Act in January, he said, we will not allow material to be withheld just because it would be embarrassing to the country. And yet he just did that today.
Wow, this is getting ugly.
It's just more evidence that this administration is becoming the greatest bait and switch in history.
Wow.
That, he's morphing into his predecessor.
Wow. He's morphing into his predecessor?
Good.
He did the right thing. That must mean...
I am offended by that statement?
Well, you ought to be. You did the right thing. And by the way, that would mean George W. Bush did the right thing. Obama is George W. Bush? Oh, my God. So how did Bathtub Boy take it? Not well. Let's just say he pulled his weak, girly punches anyway, so it amounted to, let's say nothing. Now, I want you to listen to this. Obama makes this horrible, mistaken decision, and oops again, we're going to change the subject.
The current president, meanwhile, announcing that he will now fight the release of hundreds of photographs documenting the abuse of detainees in U.S. military custody. Mr. Obama today ordering the Justice Department to try to block the release of hundreds of photos like those from Abu Ghraib that show abuse by military captors in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Pentagon having gathered the pictures while investigating the allegations of abuse, the ACLU having sued to get them. Last month, the president having agreed to their release after the federal courts ordered that they be made public.
Here comes.
This afternoon, Mr. Obama announcing the reversal of that decision with a variation of the few bad apples defense.
The individuals who were involved have been identified and appropriate actions have been taken. It's therefore my belief that the publication of these photos would not add any additional benefit to our understanding of what was carried out in the past by a small number of individuals.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, dramatic testimony about the questioning of Abu Zubaydah. You will recall it. The current president, meanwhile.
Wait a minute. Meanwhile.
He spent 3 weeks talking about this.
Meanwhile, Oh, my God.
To borrow a phrase from journalism.
Yeah, you'd have to borrow it because you don't have any yourself.
Lackey.
Has he got one of those neck collars on to prevent whiplash?
Apparently.
I'm the a-hole.
We have known that for a very long time.
You guys are ridiculous. You're retarded. What color is the sky in your universe? Here on planet Earth, it's blue.
Earning a Purple Heart in Collar Combat.
Sorry for talking while you're interrupted. Shut up there, K-Pop, before I have to smack you upside the head. Your show blows. Your show blows.
John Gibson.